The Anglo-Persian oil company was very powerful and very important for a long time, but once again it shows that some people were on top of this, or, as some historians have suggested, they may have just been doing this for the lubrication and illumination value. They may not have foreseen the vehicular revolution either. But once it strikes, even people who aren't all that visionary can see, oh my gosh, oil is the coal of the 20th century. And I often think to myself, if you found the oil of the 21st century, some clean-burning, immensely wonderful replacement to oil that could do all these fantastic things, but it only appeared in a few separate, isolated regions around the globe, what do you think the governments of the world would do today about that? Here I've been critical of the great powers over some of the horse trading that was apparent in all their warnings, and have probably overemphasized that to a degree, considering how much geopolitics did play a role and economics did play a role. The First World War had a lot of reasons, and the reasons that countries got into it had a lot of different causes and nuances as well. But it's the horse trading nature of territories that seems to stand out so much to modern sensibilities. It does make me think, however, that if that 21st century version of oil were found tomorrow, but in limited amounts in limited areas, I do wonder whether our governments would act any differently in terms of the way they would approach it than that First World War leadership. If anything, I would imagine that what they learned from the First World War is not what to do or not to do, but perhaps have a better sense of how you justify what you do. In the First World War, to our modern sensibilities, and to the changing sensibilities of the time, it all seemed a little too naked sometimes once it was exposed to the light of day. And yet it's hard to blame any of these powers for doing whatever it took to see to it that you could get yourself some of this new 20th century version of coal, because it could literally be a matter of life or death in terms of remaining a great power. And as normally happens in the lottery for natural resources, some places were blessed with lots of this stuff, and other places with almost none. The United States is one of the first places where the first great, it's the Saudi Arabia of the first great oil boom. In the United States, we find it in Pennsylvania initially, and then in a ton of other places. The United States is one of the great oil-producing nations of all time, and they really come into their own right when the oil really takes off, during the 1800s, early 1900s. Russia also has some wonderful reserves that have been under development from very early on in Baku and places in what's now parts of Azerbaijan. And the problem they were having, of course, is this Bolshevik revolution. A lot of these out-of-the-way places on the Russian periphery were deciding maybe to go on their own and take the oil with them. So temporary problems for the Russians in Baku. But what that does is create a situation where there's a giant, wonderful supply of oil sitting there with no big government controlling it temporarily, because the Bolsheviks, their whole thing is in disorder, and they're trying to get a handle on things, and they're preaching self-determination. People are taking them up on the offer. Baku is all of a sudden going to break away and become part of some maybe Azerbaijani state. That is just too much of a temptation for a bunch of great powers that look at it and think,